The dust-choked air of Silver Creek filled with screams as Tamara Keyes was dragged into the street by two burly men, her copper hair coming loose from its pins, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face. "I've done nothing wrong," she cried out, her voice breaking as they threw her roughly to the ground in the center of the town's main thoroughfare. The year was 1876, and justice in this corner of Arizona territory was as harsh and unforgiving as the desert that surrounded it. Zachary Jones had just dismounted his horse outside the general store when the commotion erupted. His tall frame straightened as he adjusted his worn Stetson, keen blue eyes narrowing at the scene unfolding before him. He'd ridden into Silver Creek not 2 days prior, looking for work after 3 months on the cattle trails. The last thing he wanted was trouble, but something about the woman's desperate pleas stirred something deep within him. "You're a thief and a liar," shouted Arnold Decker, the town's most prominent businessman, his face purple with rage as he pointed an accusing finger at Tamara. "Everyone here will know what you did," the gathering crowd murmured, their faces a mixture of curiosity and condemnation. Tamara struggled to her feet, her simple blue dress now torn and covered in the street's reddish dust. "I took nothing, Mr. Decker. I swear it on my mother's grave," she pleaded, attempting to maintain what little dignity she had left. Zachary had seen enough. With purposeful strides, he crossed the street, his spurs jingling with each step. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around the trembling woman, positioning himself between her and the furious mob that was forming. "That's enough," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable edge of steel. "This isn't how we treat women, no matter what they're accused of." Arnold Decker stepped forward, his expensive boots kicking up dust. "This isn't your concern, stranger. This woman stole valuable jewelry from my store. We deal with thieves harshly in Silver Creek." Zachary felt Tamara trembling against him, her tears soaking into his shirt. He'd seen too many innocent people strung up by angry mobs to stand by and watch it happen again. "I reckon it became my concern when you started dragging a lady through the dirt," Zachary replied evenly, his hand instinctively moving toward the holstered Colt at his hip. "Where I come from, a man accusing a woman of something brings proof before punishment." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Decker's men, the same two who had dragged Tamara into the street, moved to flank their boss, hands hovering near their weapons. "Do you have any proof of this theft, Mr. Decker?" Zachary asked, his voice carrying across the now silent street. The businessman's eyes narrowed. "My wife's pearl necklace went missing the same day this woman was cleaning our home. What more proof do I need? Maybe a witness. The necklace in her possession," Zachary suggested coolly. "Or perhaps the word of an honest man rather than one known for running crooked card games out of his back room," gasps rippled through the crowd. Decker's reputation was well known but rarely challenged so openly. "You'd best watch your mouth, cowboy," Decker snarled. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Zachary stood his ground, feeling Tamara's fingers clutching at his shirt. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm preventing a lynching based on nothing but accusations." He looked around at the townspeople. "Is that what Silver Creek stands for?" "Guilty without trial," a middle-aged woman stepped forward from the crowd. "The girl's been working for several families in town for months now. Never been a thing missing from my house." An older man nodded in agreement. "Mine neither. Always been honest, that one." Decker's face flushed darker with anger and embarrassment as the tide of public opinion began to shift. "This isn't over," he hissed, before turning on his heel and stalking away, his men following reluctantly behind. As the crowd dispersed, Zachary felt Tamara sag against him, the strength that had kept her upright finally giving out. Without a word, he scooped her into his arms. "Where can I take you?" he asked softly. "I have a small room behind the laundry," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "But I can walk. You've done enough." "I'll see you safely home," he insisted, already walking in the direction she had indicated with a weak gesture. The town's eyes followed them as Zachary carried Tamara down the dusty street. He could feel the weight of their stares, some curious, some disapproving, but he paid them no mind. The woman in his arms was light too light, as though she hadn't had a proper meal in weeks and still trembling with the aftermath of fear. The small room behind Maylin's laundry was barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a battered trunk. Zachary gently set Tamara down on the edge of the bed, then stepped back, suddenly aware of the intimacy of being alone with her in such a small space. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "You risked a lot for a stranger today." Zachary removed his hat, running a hand through his sun-bleached brown hair. No decent man could stand by and watch that. He paused, then extended his hand. "Zachary Jones." "Most folks call me Zach." "Tamara Keyes," she replied, her small hand disappearing in his calloused grip. "Everyone calls me Tamara." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Well, Miss Tamara, is there someone I can fetch for you, family or friends?" She shook her head, wincing slightly as she touched a bruise forming on her cheek where she'd hit the ground. "No family, not anymore, and friends." Her voice trailed off. Zachary leaned against the doorframe, studying her. There was something about her that stirred his protective instincts and perhaps something more that he wasn't ready to acknowledge. "Decker won't let this go," he said finally. "Men like him don't take kindly to being publicly challenged." "I know," she whispered, fear flickering across her face again, "but I didn't take that necklace. I've never stolen anything in my life." "I believe you," Zachary said simply. Tamara looked up in surprise. "Why, you don't know me," he shrugged. "I've met enough liars and thieves to know the difference. Your eyes tell the truth, Miss Keyes." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "What will you do now, Mr. Jones?" "Find work, I suppose. I came to Silver Creek looking for a ranch that might need an extra hand." He hesitated, then added, "And I'll be keeping an eye out for Decker and his men until this blows over." "You don't have to do that," she protested weakly. "I know I don't," he replied with a slight smile, "but I'm going to anyway." As Zachary left the tiny room, promising to check on her the next day, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed irrevocably. He'd ridden into Silver Creek looking for temporary work before moving on, as he always did. Now he found himself reluctant to leave, at least, until he was certain Tamara Keyes was safe. What he didn't know was that Arnold Decker was already plotting his revenge against both of them. The following morning dawned hot and clear, the Arizona sky a relentless blue overhead. Zachary had spent the night in the livery stable, his saddle as a pillow, mulling over his next move. The smart thing would be to move on, to find another town without complications. But the memory of Tamara's tear-stained face kept him rooted in Silver Creek. He made his way to the Lucky Spur Saloon, where the barkeep had mentioned the previous evening that the owner of the Circle B ranch might be looking for experienced hands. As he pushed through the batwing doors, the cool dimness inside was a welcome relief from the beating sun. "Mornin'," he nodded to the barkeep, a heavy-set man with impressive whiskers. "Heard Tucker Blanchard might be in town today, looking to talk to him about work." The barkeep jerked his thumb toward a corner table. "That's him over there. Fair warning he's in a foul mood. Lost some cattle to rustlers last week." Zachary thanked him and approached the rancher, a weathered man in his 50s whose stern expression softened marginally when Zachary mentioned his experience with cattle drives from Texas to Kansas. "Could use a man who knows his business," Blanchard admitted grudgingly. "Especially one who can handle himself with rustlers. When can you start?" "Today, if you need me to," Zachary replied, relieved at the prospect of steady work. "Good, we ride out in an hour." Blanchard knocked back the remainder of his whiskey. "One thing, though I don't want trouble with my hands. Heard you stepped in the middle of Decker's business yesterday." Zachary met the older man's gaze steadily. "I stopped an innocent woman from being roughed up based on accusations without proof. If that's trouble, then I can't promise to avoid it." Blanchard studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Just keep your gun hand ready. Decker's got the sheriff in his pocket and he doesn't forget slights." He stood, extending his hand. "Welcome to the Circle B, Jones." With employment secured, Zachary had one more stop to make before leaving town. He found Tamara at the laundry, her sleeves rolled up as she scrubbed shirts in a steaming tub. She looked up as his shadow fell across her work, and her expression changed from wariness to relief when she recognized him. "Mr. Jones," she acknowledged, wiping a damp strand of copper hair from her forehead. "I didn't expect to see you again. Told you I'd check on you," he reminded her. "And I just wanted to let you know I've taken a job at the Circle B. I'll be staying in the area." Something flickered in her green eyes, gratitude, perhaps, or something deeper. That's good to hear, though you shouldn't feel obligated to watch over me. It's not obligation, he said quietly, just seems like the right thing to do. Mei Lin, the laundry's proprietor, gave them a knowing look as she passed by with a basket of clean linens. Tamara blushed and returned her attention to her washing. I should get back to work, she murmured. Mrs. Lin has been kind enough to let me keep my position even with yesterday's trouble. Zachary nodded, understanding her need to maintain her livelihood. The Circle B is about 10 miles east of town. If you need anything at all, you send word. I will, she promised, though they both knew it was unlikely she would ask for help unless the situation was dire. As Zachary turned to leave, Tamara called after him. Mr. Jones, thank you for believing in me when no one else did. He tipped his hat to her, a gesture that felt oddly formal given the intensity of what they'd shared the previous day. Sometimes a person just needs one person to stand with them. I'm glad it could be me. The heat in the laundry wasn't solely responsible for the flush that spread across Tamara's cheeks as she watched him walk away. Life at the Circle B settled into a rhythm of hard work and simple meals. Zachary proved his worth quickly, impressing Blanchard with his skill at breaking horses and tracking strays. The other ranch hands were a mixed lot, some friendly, others wary of the newcomer who'd crossed Decker, but they all respected his work ethic and ability. Each Saturday, Zachary rode into Silver Creek for supplies and to check on Tamara. Their meetings were brief, often just a few words exchanged in the street or at the general store, but he found himself looking forward to those moments more than he cared to admit. There was a resilience to her that he admired, the way she held her head high despite the whispers that still followed her through town. 3 weeks after he'd started at the Circle B, Zachary rode into town to find an unusual commotion around the sheriff's office. Dismounting and tying his horse to the hitching post, he made his way through the crowd to discover the cause of the excitement. They found Mrs. Decker's necklace. An elderly woman was telling anyone who would listen. It was in their own bedroom all along, fallen behind the dresser. Zachary's heart lightened at the news. This would clear Tamara's name completely. He scanned the crowd, looking for her copper hair, but she was nowhere to be seen. Inside the sheriff's office, Arnold Decker was red-faced and blustering. My wife is simply mistaken. That can't possibly be the same necklace. The Keyes woman must have returned it somehow, sneaking it back into our house. Sheriff Mills, a man whose office depended on Decker's goodwill, nodded along unconvincingly. Could be, Arnold, could be. Zachary stepped forward. Or it could be that Miss Keyes was innocent all along, just as she claimed. Decker whirled to face him, his expression darkening. This isn't your concern, Cowboy. Seems to me it concerns the whole town when a man falsely accuses an innocent woman, Zachary replied evenly. Especially when that accusation nearly led to violence. The businessman stepped closer, lowering his voice. You've made an enemy you can't afford, Jones. I run this town and I can make it so you never work within 100 miles of here. Zachary didn't flinch. Threats don't scare me, Decker. And they won't change the fact that you were wrong about Miss Keyes. As he turned to leave, the sheriff called after him. Jones, you'd best remember who your friends are in Silver Creek. I know exactly who my friends are, Sheriff, Zachary replied without looking back, and who they aren't. He found Tamara at the laundry, her face flushed from the steam and exertion. When she saw him, her expression brightened, sending an unexpected warmth through his chest. You've heard the news, she asked, hope evident in her voice. I have, he confirmed with a smile. Seems you've been vindicated, Miss Keyes. She laughed, a sound he realized he'd never heard from her before. It transformed her face, making her look younger and carefree. I can hardly believe it. Mrs. Lin says people have been coming by all morning to apologize for thinking the worst of me. As they should, he said firmly. Will you walk with me a bit, to celebrate your good name being restored? Tamara glanced at Mei Lin, who shooed her away with good-natured impatience. Go, young people should enjoy sunshine, not spend all day in steam. They walked together down the main street, acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way. Zachary found himself noticing details about her he hadn't before the light dusting of freckles across her nose, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. I'm thinking of leaving Silver Creek, she said suddenly, stopping to look in the window of the general store. Zachary felt an unexpected pang at her words. Because of what happened, she shook her head. Not entirely. I've been saving for a while now. I have dreams beyond washing other people's laundry. What kind of dreams? He asked, genuinely curious. A wistful smile crossed her face. I want to open a dress shop. My mother taught me to sew and I'm good at it. Really good. I make all my own clothes. Zachary looked at her simple but well-fitted dress with new appreciation. Where would you go? Tucson, maybe, or Phoenix, somewhere bigger with more opportunities. She looked up at him, her expression uncertain. Do you think it's foolish? Not at all, he said honestly. Dreams are what keep us going through the hard times. They continued walking, their conversation turning to lighter topics: his work at the ranch, the town's upcoming harvest festival, a particularly cantankerous horse he was training. It was the longest they'd ever spoken, and Zachary found himself reluctant for it to end. As they neared the laundry again, a shot rang out, the bullet splintering the wooden post inches from Zachary's head. Instinctively, he pushed Tamara behind him, drawing his Colt in one fluid motion. Get inside, he ordered, scanning the rooftops and windows for the shooter. Another shot kicked up dust at their feet. Zachary returned fire, aiming at a flash of movement on the roof of the feed store. A yell of pain told him he'd hit his mark. Sheriff Mills and several townspeople came running at the sound of gunfire. The shooter, a man Zachary recognized as one of Decker's hired guns, was clutching his shoulder as he scrambled down the back of the building. What's happening here? The sheriff demanded, his hand on his holstered gun. Someone just tried to kill us, Zachary said tersely. One of Decker's men. Mills' expression hardened. That's a serious accusation, Jones. It's the truth, Tamara spoke up, her voice shaking but determined. I saw him too. It was Jim Curley, the man who works in Mr. Decker's warehouse. The sheriff looked between them, conflict evident on his face. Finally, he sighed. I'll look into it, but without proof that Decker ordered it. We know who's responsible, Zachary cut in, and so do you, Sheriff. As the crowd dispersed and the sheriff reluctantly went to search for the shooter, Zachary turned to Tamara. You can't stay here, it's not safe. Where would I go? She asked, her earlier confidence replaced by fear. Zachary made a quick decision. The Circle B. Blanchard's a fair man. He'll understand when I explain the situation. I can't impose. This isn't about imposing, he interrupted gently. This is about keeping you alive. The ride to the Circle B was tense, with Tamara seated in front of Zachary on his horse, his arms around her as he held the reins. They spoke little, both aware of the gravity of what had just happened and what it meant. Tucker Blanchard listened to their story with growing anger. Decker's gone too far this time, he growled. Firing on folks in broad daylight, even with his influence, he can't get away with that. He'll try, Zachary said grimly, and he won't stop coming after us. The rancher nodded thoughtfully. The lady can stay in my daughter's old room. She's been married and gone these past 5 years. He turned to Tamara. You'll be safe here, Miss Keyes. The Circle B takes care of its own. Thank you, Mr. Blanchard, Tamara said softly. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness. The older man waved away her thanks. Any man worth his salt would do the same. He gave Zachary a knowing look. Jones here certainly thinks you're worth protecting. Zachary felt heat rise to his face but didn't contradict his boss. It was true, after all. In the short time he'd known Tamara Keyes, she'd come to mean more to him than he'd ever expected. That evening, after Tamara had been settled in her room and given a hot meal, Zachary found her sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. How are you holding up? He asked, leaning against the railing beside her. She looked up at him, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and something like wonder. I keep thinking about how different today could have ended if you hadn't been there. But I was there, he said simply. Why? She asked, the question that had clearly been on her mind. Why did you step in that first day? Why have you kept helping me? You don't even know me. Zachary considered her question seriously. At first it was just the right thing to do, but now, he hesitated, unaccustomed to speaking about his feelings. Now I'd like the chance to know you better. The blush that spread across her cheeks was visible even in the fading light. I'd like that too, she admitted softly. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching riders. Zachary's hand moved to his gun as he stepped in front of Tamara protectively. Blanchard emerged from the house, rifle in hand. Company, he observed grimly. 3 riders came into view, their silhouettes dark against the twilight sky. Zachary relaxed slightly when he recognized the lead rider as Pete Wilson, one of the Circle B hands who'd gone into town that afternoon. "Trouble, boss," Pete called as they approached. "Decker's gathering men. Word is he's coming for Jones and the lady." Blanchard spat into the dust. "How many?" "Dozen or so. Some of his warehouse workers, a few drifters he's hired. They were drinking heavy at the saloon, making big talk." Pete's gaze shifted to Zachary. "They mean business, Jones." Zachary nodded grimly. "When?" "Tomorrow, they were saying, but could be sooner the way they were liquoring up." Blanchard turned to the other ranch hands who had gathered at the commotion. "Boys, looks like we might have a fight on our hands. Anyone who doesn't want part of it can ride out now, no hard feelings." Not a single man moved. Zachary felt a surge of gratitude for these men, most of whom he'd known for barely a month. "Miss Keyes is under our protection," Blanchard continued, "and we protect our own at the Circle B, set watches tonight, and at first light we prepare." As the men dispersed to their assigned tasks, Tamara turned to Zachary, her face pale in the gathering darkness. "This is all because of me. I never meant to bring this trouble to your door." "The trouble isn't yours," he assured her, taking her trembling hand in his. "It's Decker's making, not yours." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up to his face. "I've never had anyone fight for me before." "Get used to it," he said softly, the words carrying more weight than he'd intended. That night, as Zachary took his turn at watch, he found himself reflecting on the strange turns his life had taken since riding into Silver Creek. He'd always been a drifter, never staying in one place long enough to form attachments. Yet here he was, ready to face down a small army for a woman he'd known less than a month. The realization should have frightened him. Instead, it felt right, as though he'd been waiting all his life to find someone worth fighting for. Morning came with no sign of Decker and his men, but the ranch remained on high alert. Blanchard sent 2 hands to scout the approaches to the property, while the others checked weapons and prepared defensive positions around the main house and barn. Tamara insisted on helping, preparing food and coffee for the men, and tearing strips of clean cloth for bandages they all hoped wouldn't be needed. Zachary watched her working alongside the ranch cook, her movements efficient despite her obvious anxiety. "She's a good woman," Blanchard observed, coming to stand beside him. "Worth the trouble?" Zachary nodded without hesitation. "Yes, sir, she is." The older man clapped him on the shoulder. "Then we'll see this through." He paused, looking out over his land. "Been running the Circle B for 30 years now. Faced down rustlers, Apaches, drought, and flood. Never thought I'd be going to war with the leading businessman in Silver Creek." "I'm sorry to bring this to your doorstep," Zachary said, feeling the weight of responsibility. Blanchard shook his head. "Men like Decker need to be stood up to. Been too long since anyone in these parts had the guts to do it." He gave Zachary a shrewd look. "Though I reckon it takes more than guts to make a man risk everything for a woman he barely knows." Before Zachary could respond, one of the scouts came galloping back to the ranch, his horse lathered from hard riding. "They're coming," he shouted. "About 2 miles out, moving fast." Blanchard's expression hardened. "How many?" 15, maybe 20. "Decker's leading them, and they're armed for bear." The rancher turned to his men. "You all know what to do. No one fires until I give the word." He looked at Zachary. "Get Miss Keyes inside, somewhere safe." Zachary found Tamara in the kitchen, her face white with fear as she listened to the commotion outside. "They're coming," she whispered, not needing to be told. "All those men risking their lives because of me." "Because it's the right thing to do," he corrected her gently. "Blanchard wants you inside, away from the windows." She shook her head fiercely. "I won't hide while other people fight my battles. I can shoot, Zachary. My father taught me." He studied her face, seeing the determination there. "Blanchard won't like it." "I don't care," she said, surprising him with her vehemence. "This is my fight too." Zachary couldn't help the surge of admiration he felt. Most women would be hiding under a bed by now, but not Tamara Keyes. She had more courage than many men he'd known. "All right," he conceded. "But you stay close to me." They joined the others just as the first riders came into view, a cloud of dust marking their approach across the open range. Blanchard had positioned his men strategically around the ranch buildings, creating a defensive perimeter that would be difficult to breach. Arnold Decker reined in his horse about 50 yards from the main house, his men spreading out behind him. He was dressed incongruously in a fine suit despite the dust of the trail, as though he expected to conduct business rather than lead an assault. "Blanchard," he called out. "I've come for the woman and the cowboy. Send them out and we'll leave your property in peace." The rancher stepped forward, his rifle held casually but ready. "You're trespassing on Circle B land, Decker. Turn around and go back to town." "This doesn't concern you," Decker insisted, his voice carrying across the open space. "Jones interfered in my business and the Keyes woman stole from me. I'm here for justice." "Justice?" Blanchard scoffed. "Is that what you call sending a gunman to shoot at them in broad daylight? Or riding onto my land with an armed mob?" Decker's face darkened with anger. "I won't ask again. Send them out or we're coming in to get them." Zachary stepped up beside Blanchard, Tamara close at his side. "It's over, Decker," he called. "Everyone knows the necklace was found. Everyone knows Miss Keyes is innocent. And everyone will know how you tried to cover your mistake with murder," Tamara added, her voice strong despite her fear. Decker's eyes narrowed as he saw her. "You should have left town when you had the chance, girl." "This is my home," she replied defiantly. "I won't be driven out by a bully." The businessman turned to his men. "Take them," he ordered, raising his arm to signal the attack. Before he could bring it down, a shot rang out not from the ranch but from the road behind Decker's group. Sheriff Mills rode into view, accompanied by 10 mounted men. "That's enough, Arnold," the sheriff called. "This ends now." Decker turned in surprise. "Mills, what are you doing here?" "My job," the sheriff replied, his expression grim. "Something I should have been doing all along." He rode closer, his deputies fanning out to flank Decker's men. "I've got sworn statements from 3 witnesses who saw your man Jim Curley firing on Jones and Miss Keyes yesterday, and Curley himself has signed a confession saying you ordered the hit." Murmurs ran through Decker's men, many of whom had been told they were enforcing legitimate justice, not participating in attempted murder. "This is absurd," Decker blustered. "Curley acted on his own. I never save it for the judge," Mills interrupted. "You're under arrest, Arnold, for conspiracy to commit murder, among other charges." For a moment, it seemed Decker might order his men to fight anyway. But as he looked around and saw the uncertain faces of his followers and the determined expressions of the Circle B hands and the sheriff's deputies, his shoulders sagged in defeat. "This isn't over," he muttered as the sheriff approached to take him into custody. "Yes, it is," Mills replied firmly. "For too long I've looked the other way while you ran roughshod over this town. No more." As Decker was led away and his demoralized men dispersed, a cheer went up from the Circle B hands. Zachary turned to Tamara, whose eyes were bright with unshed tears. "It's really over?" she asked, as though afraid to believe it. "It's over," he confirmed, hardly believing it himself. "Decker will face justice and your name is cleared." Without thinking, he pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in a jubilant embrace. She laughed, the sound pure and joyous in the clear morning air, and when he set her down, neither of them moved to break the contact. "I thought we were going to die," she admitted softly. "Not while I have breath in my body," he promised, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth of her in his arms. Someone cleared their throat nearby, and they stepped apart, both blushing furiously. Sheriff Mills approached, looking both embarrassed at interrupting the moment and relieved that the confrontation had ended peacefully. "Miss Keyes, Mr. Jones," he nodded to each of them. "I owe you both an apology. I should have stood up to Decker long before now." "What changed your mind, Sheriff?" Zachary asked, genuinely curious. Mills looked uncomfortable. "Curley came to me last night, shot up and scared, said Decker had promised him a bonus for taking care of you two, but was now blaming him for acting alone. The man was afraid Decker would have him killed to tie up loose ends." He shook his head disgustedly. "Once Curley started talking, others followed. Seems Decker's been running more than just crooked card games. Extortion, blackmail, even rustling from the smaller ranches that couldn't fight back. And the town just let him get away with it," Tamara asked. The sheriff had the grace to look ashamed. He had money and influence, made it easy to look the other way. He straightened his shoulders. "But that's done now. Silver Creek's going to be run proper from here on out." As the sheriff left to organize the return to town, Blanchard approached, a broad smile on his weathered face. Looks like we avoided a bloodbath today, he observed. Good thing, too, I just had this place painted. The joke broke the tension, and laughter rippled through the gathered ranch hands. Blanchard turned to Tamara. Miss Keyes, you're welcome to stay at the Circle B as long as you need. After seeing your courage today, I'd say you've earned a place here. Thank you, Mr. Blanchard, she said sincerely, but I think it's time I return to town. I have a life to rebuild. The rancher nodded understanding, then looked meaningfully at Zachary. Jones, why don't you take the rest of the day? Make sure Miss Keyes gets back to town safely. The ride back to Silver Creek was different from their tense journey the previous day. A weight had been lifted, and they spoke freely of their hopes and dreams. Zachary learned that Tamara had come west after losing her parents to influenza in Chicago 3 years earlier. She'd been on her own since she was 19, working whatever honest jobs she could find to survive. What about you? She asked as the town came into view in the distance. You never talk about your past. Zachary was silent for a moment, then decided she deserved the truth. Not much to tell. My ma died when I was 12. Pa was a drunk who beat me more often than he fed me. I left home at 16 and never looked back, he shrugged. Been drifting ever since, taking work where I can find it. No place ever felt like home, she asked softly. He considered the question. Not until recently. The look that passed between them was charged with understanding. Something had changed for both of them in the crucible of the past few days. Silver Creek welcomed them with curious stares and excited whispers. News of Decker's arrest had preceded them, and the town was buzzing with the scandal. Tamara held her head high as they rode down the main street, no longer the accused thief but a woman vindicated. Mei Lin rushed out of the laundry when she saw them approach, her normally reserved demeanor abandoned as she embraced Tamara fiercely. So worried, the older woman exclaimed. Heard gunshots, then you gone. Sheriff came, took Decker away in handcuffs. She looked at Zachary with new respect. You good man, Mr. Jones. Take care of our Tamara when no one else would. Zachary felt his face grow warm at the praise. Anyone would have done the same. No, Mei Lin said firmly. Not anyone. Only man with good heart. As they bid farewell to the laundress and continued toward Tamara's small room, townspeople stopped them to offer apologies and congratulations. The change in attitude was remarkable, and Zachary thought cynically, somewhat late in coming. Will you stay in Silver Creek now? He asked as they reached her door. Or still thinking of Tucson? Tamara looked thoughtful. I'm not sure, there's nothing really holding me here except. She trailed off, her eyes meeting his. Except, he prompted, his heart beating faster. Except you, she said simply, and I don't even know if you're staying. Zachary had been a drifter all his adult life, never putting down roots, never allowing himself to form attachments that would make moving on difficult. But standing there with Tamara, he couldn't imagine riding away from Silver Creek from her. I like working at the Circle B, he said slowly. Blanchard's a good boss. Fair, and the town's not so bad now that Decker's out of the picture. A smile blossomed on her face, brightening her eyes. So you might stay. I might, he agreed, especially if I had a good reason. They stood there, the unspoken words hanging between them, neither quite brave enough to take the final step. Finally, Zachary cleared his throat. I should let you get some rest. It's been a long couple of days. It has, she agreed, though she made no move to go inside. Impulsively, he reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers engulfing her smaller ones. I'll come by tomorrow if that's all right. Maybe we could have dinner at the hotel, her smile widened. I'd like that very much. He reluctantly released her hand and stepped back, tipping his hat. Until tomorrow, then. As he walked back to his horse, Zachary felt lighter than he had in years. For the first time in his life, the prospect of staying in one place didn't feel like a trap, it felt like a promise. The next few weeks brought dramatic changes to Silver Creek. Arnold Decker was transported to Tucson to stand trial for his crimes, his business interests in town seized by the territorial authorities. The sheriff, chastened by his own complicity in Decker's reign, became zealous in enforcing the law equally for all citizens. For Zachary and Tamara, it was a time of discovery. Their dinner at the hotel became the first of many outings together. They rode into the countryside on his days off, picnicked by the creek that gave the town its name, and spent long evenings talking on the porch of the boarding house where Tamara had moved after leaving her tiny room behind the laundry. Zachary learned that she was passionate about books, having taught herself to read from her mother's Bible when she was just 5 years old. She discovered his surprising talent for whittling, the intricate wooden figures he created revealing an artistic soul beneath his rugged exterior. And they learned about each other's pasts, the pain and loneliness they'd both endured, the dreams they'd never shared with anyone else, the fears that kept them awake at night. One evening in late October, as they sat on the boarding house porch watching the sunset, Zachary finally voiced the question that had been on his mind. "Have you given any more thought to opening that dress shop?" Tamara nodded, her expression brightening. "I've been talking with Mrs. Peterson at the general store. Her husband wants to retire next year and they're looking to sell the business. The back room would make a perfect workshop. You'd stay in Silver Creek then?" He asked, trying to keep his tone casual despite the importance of her answer. She looked at him sideways, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I'm considering it. The town's growing since Decker left. There's opportunity here now." "And other reasons," he suggested, his heart pounding. "Perhaps," her smile widened, "though some of those reasons might depend on whether certain cowboys plan to continue drifting or put down roots." Zachary took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "This particular cowboy is thinking roots might not be so bad with the right incentive." The look that passed between them said more than words could express. Zachary leaned closer and Tamara met him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've never felt this way about anyone, Tamara. I think I've been looking for you my whole life without knowing it." "I know exactly what you mean," she whispered. "When you wrapped your arms around me that day in the street, it felt like coming home." 2 months later, on a crisp December morning, Zachary stood nervously at the front of Silver Creek's small church, Tucker Blanchard at his side as best man. The building was filled to capacity with ranch hands from the Circle B, townspeople, and even Sheriff Mills, whose gruff exterior had softened considerably since his stand against Decker. When the door opened, and Tamara appeared on the arm of Maylin's husband, Zachary felt his breath catch in his throat. She wore a dress of cream-colored silk that she'd made herself, her copper hair adorned with tiny white flowers. She was the most beautiful sight he'd ever seen. As she walked toward him, Zachary reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. If he hadn't ridden into Silver Creek that particular day, if he hadn't been outside the general store at the moment Tamara was dragged into the street, if he hadn't followed his instinct to protect her, their paths might never have crossed. When she reached him and placed her hand in his, he knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice carrying through the hushed church, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. They exchanged vows and rings, his a plain gold band, hers a delicate circle with a small pearl that Zachary had saved for months to purchase. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared at last. "You may kiss the bride." Zachary lifted Tamara's veil and gazed into her shining eyes. "Hello, Mrs. Jones," he whispered before claiming her lips in a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. The celebration that followed at the Circle B was the most joyous event Silver Creek had seen in years. Blanchard had insisted on hosting. Proud as a father of the man Zachary had become in the months since he'd first ridden onto the ranch looking for work. As the newlyweds danced under lantern light in the ranch's barn, Zachary held his bride close. "Happy?" he asked, though her radiant smile had already answered the question. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she assured him. "I used to think my life would always be scrubbing other people's laundry and living in rooms no bigger than a closet. And now?" He prompted, spinning her gently to the music of the fiddle and guitar. "Now I have a husband who loves me, friends who stood by us, and a future full of possibilities." She looked up at him, her expression turning serious. "You know, that day when Decker's men dragged me into the street was the worst day of my life until it became the best day, because it brought you to me." Zachary kissed her forehead. "For me too, I'd spent so long drifting, never letting myself get attached to anyone or anything. Then I saw you and something inside me just knew. As the evening wore on and guests began to depart, Blanchard approached the couple with a mysterious smile. "Got a wedding present for you too," he announced, handing Zachary an envelope. Inside was a deed to 10 acres of Circle B land, with a note explaining that the rancher was giving them the parcel that adjoined the town, perfect for building a home within easy reach of Tamara's future shop. "Mr. Blanchard, we can't accept this," Tamara protested. Though her eyes shone with gratitude, the rancher waved away her objection. "Sure you can. I've got more land than I know what to do with, and no children here to inherit it all." He clasped Zachary's shoulder. "Besides, can't have my best hand living in town. This way you're close enough to work the ranch but can still get the missus to her shop." Zachary was speechless, overwhelmed by the generosity of a man who had been a stranger less than 6 months ago. "I don't know how to thank you," he managed finally. Blanchard shook his head. "No need for thanks. Just be happy, raise some good kids, and maybe name one of them Tucker." He winked at Tamara, who blushed prettily. Later that night, as they lay in each other's arms in the small cabin Blanchard had prepared for their first night as husband and wife, Zachary marveled at how completely his life had changed. "What are you thinking about?" Tamara asked, tracing lazy patterns on his chest. "How lucky I am," he replied honestly. 6 months ago, I had nothing but my horse and saddle. Now I have a wife, land, good work, friends. And a home," she added softly. "A real home, not just a place to sleep." He pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "That's the most precious part, knowing I belong somewhere with someone." Spring brought the construction of their house on the land Blanchard had given them. The entire Circle B crew turned out to help raise the walls and set the roof, while the women of Silver Creek organized a quilting bee to furnish the new home. Tamara worked alongside them all, her natural leadership abilities emerging as she directed the creation of a home that reflected both her refined taste and Zachary's practical nature. By summer, they had moved into the completed house, a comfortable 4-room structure with a wide front porch and large windows that caught the morning light. Tamara had also secured the purchase of the general store's back room and transformed it into Keyes Custom Fashions, where she created dresses and shirts that quickly gained popularity beyond Silver Creek. Zachary continued working at the Circle B, but also began breeding and training horses on their own land, his natural affinity with the animals turning into a profitable side business. Life settled into a rhythm of hard work and sweet rewards, each day ending with them returning to each other, sharing the triumphs and challenges of their separate endeavors. On their first anniversary, Zachary surprised Tamara with a gift he'd been working on in secret for months, a rocking chair he'd crafted himself, each piece lovingly shaped and fitted, the wood polished to a warm glow. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her hand over the smooth armrest. "When did you find time to make this?" "Here and there," he said, pleased by her reaction. "Blanchard let me use his workshop on rainy days." He hesitated, then added, "I thought it might come in handy soon." She looked up at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. "How did you know?" "Know what?" he asked innocently. Tamara laughed, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "That we're going to need a rocking chair for more than just us." Zachary's eyes widened as the meaning of her words sank in. "You mean where you're going to have a baby," she confirmed, her face glowing with happiness. "Dr. Matthews confirmed it yesterday." With a whoop of joy, Zachary lifted her off her feet and spun her around, then quickly set her down again, suddenly concerned. "Should I be doing that?" "Is it safe for the baby?" Tamara laughed at his sudden shift from exuberance to worry. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass. The baby and I are fine." That night, as they lay in bed making plans for the future, Zachary reflected on the chain of events that had led them to this moment of perfect happiness. "It all started with you being dragged into the street," he mused, his hand resting protectively over their unborn child. "If that hadn't happened, then you would have found some other excuse to rescue me," she teased. "You're a knight in dusty leather, Zachary Jones," he chuckled at the description. "And you're the bravest woman I've ever known, Tamara Jones. Our child is going to have one hell of a mother." 7 months later, Eleanor May Jones entered the world with a lusty cry that announced her arrival to everyone in the vicinity of Dr. Matthews' office. She had her mother's copper hair and her father's blue eyes, and from the moment Zachary first held her tiny form in his arms. He was completely and utterly besotted. The years that followed brought more blessings: a son, Tucker James, born 2 years after Eleanor, the expansion of Tamara's dress shop into the largest clothing establishment in the county, Zachary's growing reputation as the finest horse trainer in the territory. Silver Creek prospered in the post-Decker era, growing from a dusty outpost into a thriving town with a school, a proper hotel, and even a small theater where traveling shows performed. The Joneses became pillars of the community, their home a gathering place for friends and neighbors, their success a testament to what courage and determination could achieve. On their 10th anniversary, Zachary and Tamara hosted a celebration at their expanded home, now a handsome ranch house surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. Eleanor, 9 years old and already showing her mother's talent with a needle, helped serve refreshments to the guests. Tucker, 7 and his father's shadow, proudly showed visitors the yearling colt Zachary had given him to train. As twilight fell and lanterns were lit around the property, Zachary found Tamara standing alone on the porch, looking out over the land they had made their own. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Jones," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned back against him, fitting perfectly as she always had. "I was just thinking about that day in the street, how terrified I was, how hopeless everything seemed. And then—" He prompted, knowing there was more. "And then this stubborn cowboy stepped in front of an angry mob and wrapped his arms around me." She turned in his embrace to face him. "That was the moment my life truly began." Zachary brushed a strand of copper hair now threaded with a few strands of silver from her face. "Mine too, though I didn't realize it at the time." "No regrets?" she asked, a question she still posed occasionally as though part of her couldn't quite believe their good fortune. "Not a single one," he assured her, lowering his head to kiss her with the same tenderness he'd shown on their wedding day. "Every morning I wake up beside you is a gift I never thought I'd have." From inside the house came the sound of laughter as Tucker regaled their guests with an exaggerated tale of his father's exploits. Eleanor's clear voice called for them to come back inside for the cake cutting. Tamara smiled up at her husband, her eyes reflecting the love that had only deepened over the years. "We should go back in." "In a minute," Zachary said, holding her close for one more moment of private connection. "I just want to remember this, you, me, everything we've built together." As they stood on the porch of the home they had created, surrounded by the life they had forged from the most unlikely of beginnings, both knew with absolute certainty that the day a frightened woman was dragged into the street and a brave cowboy defied convention to protect her had been not an ending, but a beginning, the first chapter in a love story that would continue to unfold for all the days of their lives.